As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a gangster.
One of the worst performances of my career, and they never doubted it for a second.
We all go a little mad sometimes.
I believe there's a hero in all of us that keeps us honest, gives us strength, makes us noble.
You just gotta keep living, man. Livin.
Son of a bitch. He stole my life.
I love the smell of napalm in the morning.
Megalopolis is one of the best films of 2024. That is a statement you probably have not heard from too many people. Welcome back to the Shot by Shot podcast, where we break down and analyze the play-by-play of your favorite films, modern films, old films, new films, foreign films. We cover it all. And today we're going to be covering one of the most controversial films of the year, Francis Ford Coppola's self-financed epic, Megalopolis. And I'm sure many of you might be ready to click off right now because I'm sure there were a lot of people out there who did not love this film, but we are here to bring justice to the universe and give this film the praise that it deserves. And if any of you are saying this is rage bait, this is just clickbait, whatever, no, it is not. I saw this movie 4 times, and I don't go and see a movie 4 times just to get people riled up on the internet. I actually genuinely love this movie, and so did Oscar and Ryan. We have so much to talk about. We're getting into the filmmaking of this film, where it stands in Francis Ford Coppola's filmography, what it is that he's trying to say with the film, what works, what doesn't work, covering a lot of the common criticisms of this film, and overall just break down all of it for you today. And yeah, this is a film that I did love this film. And just because I loved it does not mean that I would recommend this to most people. This is a film that is made for people like me at the end of the day. And we get so many films a year that are all about the traditional structure, traditional plot, traditional narrative, and they mostly follow the same formulas and structures, the majority of films that come out. This film is not doing that. And yes, some people have called it a mess. It is not a mess. And it's not a mess because there's no interest in following a tightly structured narrative. This film is not just a story. This is a picture show. Francis Ford Coppola's production company is American Zoetrope. And for those of you who don't know, a Zoetrope was a toy before movies even existed, which basically presented the illusion of motion. And Coppola is going back to the foundation of cinema with just the magic of the moving picture and not focusing on the same structures and conventions that we get conditioned to us over and over again, but trying to do something new with the art form. And we can't wait to break this down for you. So, Oscar, what are your thoughts on Francis Ford Coppola's Megalopolis?
Yeah, this is a film obviously premiered back in Cannes in May to some very divisive reactions. I think the first trailer dropped by then, everyone was kind of raving. The first trailer was really, really great. And then kind of the reactions came out, and I think a lot of people's hype dropped. But I think with a lot of modern day Coppola, that's the kind of the trend we've seen. And the shift that he's taken this century is crazy compared to films like Godfather and Apocalypse Now. But I think it's incredible the way he's changed. Obviously, with films like Twixt and Tetro, which I absolutely love. Twixt especially was very divisive, like this film, and it's incredible to see a filmmaker kind of evolve in his style, and it's just an honor to kind of be alive and experience a film like this, especially in glorious IMAX, which I saw it in initially. I think for me, I absolutely love this film both times, but the first time I think you get a bit overwhelmed, and I kind of saw it as messy, but I don't mean messy in a negative way that first time around. But the second time I saw it, it was almost a whole different experience. I still absolutely loved it both times, but I think people are really overblowing the use of messy here. And I know I said it in my initial review, but I really don't think it's that difficult to follow. I think it's fairly straightforward for the most part. People just, the kind of discourse it's creating, like, oh, this is the worst film I've ever seen, from like just critics. It's not even that critics are on one side, audiences are on the other. Everybody's split. Critics calling it the worst film they've ever seen. I think Mark Kermode, famous British critic, called it that. And then you kind of get a lot of other critics who are absolutely loving it. But yeah, obviously a 40-year passion project, 40 years in the making, pretty incredible. And its production's been through a lot. We know Francis isn't exactly the best of guys. There's been some troubled things that he's been doing on production that has been pretty awful. But for me, I was absolutely blown away by this film and what Francis's vision was. Just some of the most insane images we've seen for a while, and we won't see a film like it. And I'm just happy to be alive to experience it.
Yeah, the reactions have been something else. In ways, I get it, but also I don't get it at all, really, on the level that it is. It reminds me of Babylon, like when that first got released at festivals and people either hated it or loved it, but it's even worse to this extent where it seems to be a lot of hate, because I feel that people are just going to it expecting to hate it at this point. I feel like the almost headline of Francis Ford Coppola funds his own movie, people are the kind of general audience are already like maybe think it's pretentious or not going into expecting not to like it. Which my two experiences were very different. The first one I watched in an empty IMAX theater. The second time I experienced the walkouts, people walking out 20 minutes into it. You'd maybe assume that we were just like Coppola fanboys liking this, but I feel like the context of seeing Coppola's filmography is important in watching this. Like over the last couple of years, I've really explored his filmography, and it's one of the most diverse filmmakers maybe ever. It's like every single film is completely different experience. He's constantly challenging his own ability, kind of challenging the barriers of filmmaking. Like he's the definition of an artist. Like he never holds back. He never compromises his vision. Like everything is his own, whether you like it or is better or worse. Like he's always putting himself on the line for the film. And I think his journey in Hollywood is really important to understand. Megalopolis, which is maybe why a lot of his bigger fans are the ones liking this compared to general audiences. Like even going back to like the start of his career, like Apocalypse Now, at the height of Hollywood, he was coming off 2 Best Picture wins, and he still couldn't do whatever he wanted. Like he pretty much funded that on his own. And I think that's one of the greatest feats of filmmaking ever in Apocalypse Now. But that was a success. It was profitable. It worked back then. And then his next one, he's again put his own money into the line. Like Alex was saying, like his production company, he started it, created crazy sets, put it into this passion project, and it pretty much killed him financially. And I think it was still one of the great American films, but that ended up being a major flop, and it really put him down into this like spiral of making more, I guess, studio films, you could say, making stuff for money. There's obviously the Godfather 3 is the big one where he kind of just made that because he needed the money in the 80s and the 90s. But even then, they've got like great films like Dracula, Rumblefish. Each kept making great films that people didn't really appreciate. Eventually just left the studio system working on these really small projects, like you were saying, like Tetro from 2009, Twixt, which there may be some hit or miss for most people. A lot of them not been seen, but I think there's some very personal films in there, and they've all kind of developed his style towards Megalopolis, and they're all pretty important for seeing how his style's developed. So yeah, it's another example of Coppola just putting absurd amount of money into a project, but I don't get how you could not respect that. Like I understand not liking it, but like hating this with like passion is just, it makes no sense. I don't know how you could hate someone doing this, like just making a passion project, putting all their money into it, like not caring about profit. It's one of the most unique things to probably come out of this century, and it's a bold swing. It makes sense that people don't like it, but it's actively hating it. Strange. It's a one of a kind experience. If you've not seen it, go and see it on the biggest screen possible. This is incredible in IMAX. It's a project of that size that should really be seen in theaters. Don't wait for digital. Go and see it in theaters. I gave it a 4.5 out of 5. I don't think you said your score, Oscar.
Yeah, I also gave it a 4.5 out of 5. Currently sits at my 3rd spot on the year. I think it's interesting. The people's use of pretentious when it comes to films always makes me laugh, because I don't really. I just, in film, when people call films pretentious, it doesn't have any value for me. Like, why you? It's just. My perception is people just call it that when it's like something's beyond their capabilities almost. Not that I'm saying that they're better than you, but people just dismiss it and just call it that word and just leave it at that. And yeah, so many people are calling this pretentious, but it's a man and his vision at the end of the day, and it almost feels like when you're doing it, you're just trying to restrict what people are trying to do. And yeah, for me, it worked out perfectly.
Everything both of you are saying, I think, is really important things to talk about, because one of the things Coppola opened up a lot of his interviews by saying is film an art form or is film a business? And how you view film is really going to affect the way that you feel about this film. Because, like I said, this is not a film I would recommend to everyone. I can understand why certain audiences didn't respond well to this film. But at the end of the day, this guy self-financed over $100 million of his own money to bring this to life. How are you going to root against that? And then root for a mega conglomerate like Disney, which is an assembly line factory with no care and no heart into their product. And then you're going to cheer when a guy who cares so much that he will bankroll 100 million without even caring if it makes money back just because he is so passionate about it. I don't understand how people can root against that. Now, that being said, I can understand why certain audiences didn't respond to it, because it's very different from what we're used to. And like Oscar said, the pretentious criticism, I think, is overused, because I think it's only really valid when it involves something, some form of like participation that you only can do if you have a certain like level of income or something like that to participate in. But the art of the moving picture is something for everyone. From the foundation of film, it doesn't matter what language you speak, your education level, everyone can go and look at moving images and respond in a certain way, which I think raises the conversation of what is a movie. And obviously we have 100 years of, film and show one after the other, which is pumping out the same structure, the same narrative. So we've been so conditioned to think that a film has to have these story beats. It has to have, these motivations and this rising action and all of these kind of structures that we've been conditioned to think every film needs to have. And Coppola is just so aware that the only thing film needs to be is one thing, and that's a moving picture. That is the foundation of what this art form is. As it progressed, then they found, okay, a lot of audiences did respond to a certain structure, but why can't we push the art form any further? Why does it have to be pretentious when a filmmaker wants to try something different? And when they try something different, that might not be the film that you wanted to watch, but I feel like you should at least respect the attempt of someone who's trying to use the art form in a different way and is trying to play around with film structure and the way stories are told and the way we experience a film. And a lot of people think the most important job of a film is to tell a story, and I just don't agree with that. I think whether it's film or music or paintings or any other art form, I think the most important thing is not necessarily that a story is told, is that it creates some form of an emotional response. And I'm sure maybe there were some people who didn't respond emotionally to a film like Megalopolis. But I think ultimately the criticism then would be that you didn't respond emotionally, not the fact that it doesn't follow traditional narrative structure. And I think people have just become so desperate to have a plot to like hold on to follow, and just like, okay, what mystery they're creating, what's the ending, and like finding out the ending. But film can be so much more. And Coppola's at a point in his career where he's given you The Godfather. He's already given you films that have the most perfect structured narrative arc that any filmmaker could have ever gave you. And he's trying to now do something different. This film is all about the future and creativity. And people see it as a film that's about certain ideas, whether it's, political or about society, whatever. But I think it's really a film about creativity. And, this is when I go to the film, people love to tell us why we go to the film. Like, oh, we go to the film for communal experience, or we go to the films to be told a story. And it's all bullshit, because everyone goes to the film for a different reason. Everyone goes to the theater for a different reason. People are looking for not everyone is looking for the same thing when they enter a theater. And when I walk into a movie theater, what I'm looking for is I want to see something creative. And I think that even if Megalopolis does have some flaws to it, there's just such pure creativity and imagination at such a high level on display at all times. He's trying so many different forms of storytelling and different filmmaking techniques, and just using every single tool in cinema, whether that's the production design, the music, the sound, the wardrobe, the characters, the blending of different eras and times. He's just using every creative tool he has available to try and craft something new and craft something fresh in an industry that we all know has gotten very stale. How many times are we going to watch another Marvel movie or another horror sequel? Or Hollywood is in a state where everything we get is a remake, spinoff, or sequel. And Coppola, whether you like it or not, is trying to give us something new. And I think that that is something admirable, even if it's not something that you respond to as well as other people, as people like us, because this is art is about creativity. And what he's saying is that human beings are on this earth to create and to, have discussions and see what we could do in the future that we haven't already done. And I just think that it's hats off to Francis Ford Coppola for what he is attempting here.
Yeah, I completely agree with what you're saying. I think people, you were talking about the way people see film. People see it as such a black and white thing. I think it's ridiculous. You kind of, when you're kind of getting into film, you kind of get people that will say, "Oh, yeah, it has to have like good writing, coherent plot, has to be characters have to be kind of really interesting in that, and that has to be for every single film." And in the reality, what works for one film, what one film's kind of fast pacing will work for one film, it won't work in another film. Slow pacing might not work for one film, it will work perfectly for another. But people just see as every film has to be this individual, like it has to tick all those boxes, like it has to be kind of pacing has to be kind of good and things like that. And in reality, it's really just not that. And I'm not saying that as an excuse for people to like the film, but I'm just saying it because of the way that people are speaking about the film and speaking about a lot of films in general. It's an art form that just has so much to it, and not everything has to be thinked off the same criteria. Like I say, one film's strength could be another film's weak point. And vice versa. And I think this film brings up that point so well again. And the fact that some people are saying that he wasted 120 million because it's going to flop. Francis Ford Coppola does not give one damn about this film's box office. He does not care. The fact that this film exists is a miracle, and that's all he cares about, that he managed to get it made. The discourse is just crazy online.
I don't know, it's weird. Generally, I think people just, with big releases, they don't like when, like, creative stuff, like say, like the double split screen where it's split into 3 halves or stuff like that. Like, the way people have been talking about this, it's like, it's badly edited, it looks bad, it's bad acting. I think people just don't know how to respond whenever someone does anything creative in a big film. I was thinking of, like, Doctor Strange 2, where people, like, say that has bad editing just because Sam Raimi has any sort of flair to even put into his movie, and people look down on it. Or when people say Star Wars is aged badly because the editing is just a little bit different. And I think people just see, like, those little bits of creative elements put in, and they just assume that it's bad for some reason. They're, like, just neglect that it could be cool. And I think narratively, one of the main things in this that's maybe pushing audience away is that, and making that, thinking that it's messy, like Alex is saying, is that it has these, like, set piece moments where, like, scattered throughout, where they don't necessarily push the, like, narrative forward. Like, take the Colosseum scene, for example. That's like 20 minutes of just spectacle. Like, Adam Driver's tripping out with crazy visuals. The colors are going crazy. It's just that there's a small subplot that ends in like 10 minutes about the auction that Claudio uses to expose the girl. It doesn't do anything for the narrative going forward. Like, Adam Driver's arrested and then it's pretty much dropped. It's more world building and kind of exploring the character of Caesar, and in a way, it's kind of like the party scene from Babylon in a way of this film. Just lots of spectacle and crazy fun moments. But I think, despite it being pretty early on, is more of like a tap out point for a lot of people. On my second viewing, that's when people kind of seem to just walk out and give up on the movie. At least on that watch. Yeah, I think people are maybe even overthinking it at times. The plot is pretty straightforward and surprisingly coherent when you're not going on like the random like subplots. It was pretty coherent for what I expected, because everybody was saying it's a mess. Like, people were saying it's like Southland Tales, but it's really not. The kind of like main plot is straightforward. The only thing that was really quite confusing is that I did like Roman history stuff, just 'cause I'm not really familiar with a lot of that, and just sometimes I was like, what the fuck he's even talking about. But then even when he would do that, like when they're in like the sky tower, that you just got this like pretty skyline and behind them just look at when they're like just talking very academically. But that's only in some moments, and then there'll just be like a crazy scene after it. It's in a way it's all over the place, but I don't think it's really that complicated of a narrative.
In my review, I kind of described it as harmonious chaos. You know, a film that I've just come out of, Joker 2, that has some crazy tonal whiplash that is awful. I think this film uses that to its strengths very well, and it embraces that throughout the film, right from the off.
Yeah, I think there's one thing you really need to have when you're going into a film like this, and that's an open mindset. And I think you need to just have an open mindset to the possibilities of what a movie can be. And like we all do have certain expectations with when we go into a movie theater because to a degree, like I know I said already, we've been conditioned to expect one thing from a movie. And normally when you see something that's kind of taking risks and is more experimental film, it's done on a lower budget. We're not used to seeing a film of this size and scale that's taking these bold risks and doing experimental things like Coppola is doing here because so few people have 100 million to pump into their own film. And like you can compare that to the show like most recently in the new Penguin TV series came out, and like that I remember I was on shout out to Cash in the Film Scoop podcast, but I went on there to talk about it because I did not like the episode 1 of the Penguin, and there's probably a lot of people who like that and don't like Megalopolis. But what I said to everyone is this: I said, can anyone name me one creative thing that this episode did? And not one person could name me a single thing. And like, yes, it follows traditional narrative structure. It has the plot points. It has the story beats. It has the rising action, all that stuff. But it didn't do one thing that was inventive or creative or required like any sense of imagination. And listen, if that's not what you're interested in, like that's okay. Like not everyone has to have look for the same things in film that I am. But I think it's respectable that a film is attempting to do something creative and make bold decisions and actually try something new. And yeah, I know I'm a TV hater, but I'm gonna to a degree blame TV because TV and the rise in it does condition you to watch the story with the same formulas and it's doing the same things over and over again over months of watching that, rather than if you watch 20 movies, you're going to see 20 different directing styles, and you're just more used to seeing different types of storytelling, different approaches to the art form. And so I do think that's why I always encourage people to watch like a large variety of films and different types of artworks. And film is able to pull from art forms besides the stage and old traditional theater. Like there's the art form of sound, there's the art of music, the art of images. There's so many art forms that that film can pull from. And I like how Coppola is pulling from a lot, where like someone who I really see a lot of influence in this film from is Salvador Dali, who is a great surrealist painter. And he's famous for the melting clocks image, which of course, clearly you can see traces of in this film. And I think what it comes down to this film, and one thing that's turning a lot of people off, is that it's high surrealism. And it's a film that doesn't exist in reality. It doesn't have any interest in existing in reality for a single second. And surrealism it's always been divisive, and it always will be divisive. Now, that being said, when we look at, like Ryan said, this film hits differently when you're watching Coppola's filmography in order, like you would a TV show, and you see the evolution of his style. And I think most of the great directors in history, when they get revisited, people often will look at their filmography in order, like one cohesive body of work. Fellini, who is one of my favorite filmmakers, is a filmmaker especially who, when you watch through his filmography, you see a real stylistic and artistic evolution. And I think it has that same effect here, where Coppola knew that this could be his last film. He knew that this is essentially the film he might be going out on. And I think that when you watch it and you see how Francis Ford Coppola evolved as an artist, and like when you do The Godfather at such a young age, and you're now have to live up to the fact that every film people will likely see as inferior because so many people think you've made the greatest film ever made. He always since then was trying to do something fresh and new with the art form. And I think this is him just leaning fully into that, using everything he's learned over his career. And you see traces of every Coppola film at some point in this film. which I think makes it so interesting. And like when you look at the masters of cinema, whether it's Bergman, Kurosawa, Fellini, you often see surrealism at the end of their careers, whether it's Kurosawa's Dreams or Bergman's Fanny and Alexander, or pretty much the entire second half of Fellini's career. You see a lot of these great artists once they get to the point where they've kind of done the entertaining thing, they've made their financial successful films. They want to start pushing the craft and seeing what can be done with this art form and really just start inventing and moving cinema forward. And I think this is Coppola essentially doing the same thing. I actually wish that he put his name above the title, like Fellini and Kurosawa did with some of their later work. And surrealism is something that will turn people off essentially. But I hate the word avant-garde, but it's because I think that word does sound a bit pretentious, but I think it's this experimental nature of wanting to try something new, which then we see reflected in the main character of the film. And what this film really is I think an exploration of Francis Ford Coppola's mind. And when you're in the mind of when you're in the creative mind, time doesn't exist like it does in this film, and you're able to control and manipulate time. Every era and influence is blended together, where we see this blending of from ancient Rome to modern nightclubs, and you just see this blending of everything into this one creative kind of pot, where when you have an idea for so long like Coppola's had, it does get lost, and kind of your idea goes this way, it goes that way, and sometimes you lose track of, okay, what was the original idea. And I think most people are going to see that and say, oh yeah, because it's a mess. But no, it's not a mess. It's an exploration of that. And a mess is something where the film isn't aware of it. This film is very aware of how kind of the different directions the creative mind can go. And it's really exploring that through a main character who is kind of going through that with his search to creatively find answers of how to create a better future, like Coppola is doing with this film. And I really see traces of course, Fellini's 8.5, where in a very similar way, it's about an artist who's trying to finish his film and trying to figure out how to one up his last masterpiece, and inevitably leading to like this creative enlightenment into surrealism that we saw from Fellini when he went from the mass hit of La Dolce Vita into a more surrealist direction with 8.5. And I think you really see that from Coppola here. So when you watch his filmography in order, which it of course will be when the film historians look at it years from now, this will be I think history will be very kind to this film.
It's going to become a cult classic for sure.
Oh, 100%. Real quick, actually, Coppola owns the rights to Apocalypse Now. Do you know why?
Because no one else would fund it. So he had to just
because no one else wanted it. No one else wanted the rights to Apocalypse Now, which is now like probably the most common answer, except for maybe Saving Private Ryan, of the greatest war film ever made. One other example is another filmmaker who self-funded a film and it bankrupted them, and they lived the rest of their life in like dead broke because of that. And that's French filmmaker Jacques Tati's film Playtime, which is now, like, I know some of you listening might not be into foreign cinema, but if you know foreign cinema, that is one of like the most acclaimed popular films in history now. And it got no appreciation in its era. Coppola's been through this. He's been through the Apocalypse Nows. He knows how history goes and the way viewpoints change over time. And he said that the reward is not the box office. If you're making the Avengers, what you want is to make the most money. But when you're making a film like Megalopolis, Coppola said the biggest reward is hearing that a filmmaker was inspired by something he did. And he wants the next generation of artists to be inspired to take risks and do something fresh in their films going forward because of his film. So I do appreciate him kind of sacrificing his immediate finances for the sake of the future of the art form.
Yeah, I like your comparison to like Kurosawa and Fellini's late career projects, because this does feel like almost in the way Kurosawa was experimenting with color towards the end of this. I feel like Coppola's experimenting with a more digital side of cinema, and this is probably going to a kind of look into what films maybe could be more like in the future. I generally don't like very digital strong films, at least recent, more modern ones. I don't like a lot of the stuff I didn't love the stuff he was doing visually in Twixt, his last film. That was a very digital heavy movie.
Ooh, it's great. It's great.
Yeah, it's one of his lesser films, but I can see why people love it. I hate when digitally shot films look like real life. That's just not what I want in film. It's I want it to feel either otherworldly or cinematic, and they just kind of end up looking cheap. If they're not made by one of the greats like this, for example, like Twixt is on a very low budget, so you can see why it ended up like that. But it's a style that's been compared to stuff like Leos Carax's films, like Annette and Holy Motors, which are more recent kind of films of this kind of almost style. But they're films that I feel like the digital kind of puts me off those films. However, the lighting in here and the production design is all very surrealistic, like Alex was saying, and Megalopolis, which makes it feel in a very different way. It doesn't look like the usual digital films that we've been getting recently, and it obviously has those like modern influences. And it's very digitally. The look of it is very digital, but it's based in like a very fabricated world. It really reminded me of One from the Heart, which he made in the 80s. It's got like the very like artificial sound stages and the kind of theatrical set pieces that you would expect for like theater. Like the clock on top of the skyscraper, or the floating steel pillars, like they're all kind of ripped out a musical stage. A lot of the aspects in the film play like the theatrical nature of the film. Like it's stuff is introduced and just kind of dropped very quickly. Like I was saying, it's almost in stages of a play, and the performances are very theatrical as well. Like one of the very first like scenes that we get is that one where we're kind of introduced to pretty much every character in the movie at the Mayor Cicero's presentation of the new installment of the city. There's that walkway scene where all above the model of the city, and they all
It's so
talk in
funny
a
that
way that like
scene.
yeah, it's it's such a weird scene. But it is very theatrical. Like they all take turns talking, and like it does feel like a play in that moment, as well as like the title cards and the voiceover of Lawrence Fishburne playing in them, an almost Shakespearean kind of feel to it. It's adding to the kind of modern Rome society. I really like the way he blended like all those elements together. Yeah, it really is like a blend of everything that he'd done in his career up to this point.
Yeah, the characters just randomly breaking out into Shakespearean and Roman monologues is so funny. Just like when he's like, is it just start saying like to be or not to be in like the middle of that scene where on the top of the model city, Adam Driver. That scene is hilarious.
Yeah, and you just get
I,
Dustin Hoffman in the background, like
Dustin
getting mad
Hoffman's
at him.
character, he says like steal, 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 and it's like concrete, concrete for no reason. Just says it 3 times. His character's just in the back, and then you just got Jason Schwartzman, who his character is just the funniest kind of placement of a character in that film. He's just holding like a massive key in the background, just smiling and looking happy. Yeah, he almost looks unrecognizable without a beard, to be honest. But yeah, I think that scene is kind of an interesting introduction. And yeah, this film really wastes no time. We're kind of jumping from place to place, kind of different things are happening. That scene kind of in the opening. Oh, by the way, we are going to spoil everything in this film. So if you haven't seen it, go see it. We absolutely recommend that you go see it. But yeah, we're going to spoil everything now. That kind of opening scene with where he's kind of on top of the building, kind of stops time, and we get kind of that dolly zoom. What is it? Yeah, is it dolly zoom?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a dolly zoom in the very opening scene where he's on top.
Yeah.
Of it.
When he's on top and looks down is very, very nice. But yeah, I think the stylistic choices of this film are absolutely fascinating. There's a lot of people have been complaining about the noticeability of the green screen. I think it works really, really well for the style that Coppola's going for here. I just think
I love the volume shots so much when they're in that clock tower kind of scene. It works so well in that. And I'd completely forgot about how when he fired in 2022, he like fired like the whole visual effects team because they wanted to use green screen and he wanted to use the volume. I completely forgot that even happened. But he was right because the volume. I think this is the best use of the volume since the Batman. I really like those scenes.
Yeah, and we kind of one of my favorite sequences is with the whole with like we go in like the moving statues and we go into kind of that underground world. Those sequences as we're kind of low angle shots looking up of the buildings and the architecture, and we're kind of just moving along in those cars. The way those shots look, and we get kind of the night sky, and the buildings kind of got these really nice glow to them. The way he makes those shots look, I think, are absolutely beautiful. And then we cut into the moving statue sequences, which are absolutely incredible. My favorite sequence of the film. And then there's that. There's the kind of the shots where he's getting out of the car in the background. Oh, it looks, you can tell obviously there's volume there, but it looks so nice, and it's so perfect. And we get that gorgeous split duality lighting, which is used a few times in this film, like golden against the blue, and it looks absolutely incredible. Blown away by the vision that Coppola was going for with this film. And yeah, people are complaining about the CGI, and people complain about the CGI, and people will just be perfectly fine with something like Deadpool and Wolverine, which looks like absolute rubbish. And I think it's just absolutely crazy. Like I said, people see films so black and white about stylistic choices when you're going with CGI and green screen. People like, oh, this looks bad. And I'm not saying that that's an excuse for bad CGI. We saw it with Furiosa. George Miller has that specific style that he's going for, and I think it works for that film's strengths perfectly, just as it does for this film. But that doesn't mean that it works for every film, because like a lot of Marvel films, it doesn't, because their films are dull and look like slop for the most part.
You mean
that's
almost
what I'm
every
referring
Marvel
to. Pardon?
You said some Marvel films. I think you meant to say almost
the
every
majority.
Marvel film. The CGI looks
almost
like
every
shit.
Marvel film. Devil and Wolverine, massive example this year, looks like absolute grey slop, and it has no sense of style to it whatsoever. This, I think, like I said, I think it's beautiful. It really, really is. Some of the images that we see, specifically towards kind of the latter stages, specifically after Adam Driver's character gets shot in the face, there's kind of that whole sequences, and kind of the images just erupt all at once. We get some of the most insane dissolves you've ever seen. Those whole sequences are absolutely gorgeous. I kind of wait for this to drop on VOD just to get the HD images for some of those shots, because they're incredible. And I think I've heard a lot of people talking about Adam Driver as well, and his career in the 2020s. People have been slagging off his agent, like, oh, he's picking such bad roles. He is one of the most fascinating actors out there, and one of the best. The roles he's been picking this decade have not all the films I've loved. Annette, I didn't think was that great. I loved him in Ferrari. What else he done? He did that Terry. What's his surname? I've forgotten. The guy does all those weird films. I think he released. He did his passion project. I think it was it might have been 2020. It got lost, I think, in the pandemic a bit. But the roles he's been picking is just so fascinating. The range has been choosing, and people have just been slagging him off for absolutely no reason. And I just cannot do anything but admire the choices that he's been making and where he's been going, because once again, I thought he's really fantastic in this, and the ensemble as a whole was interesting to say the least.
Some of my favorite performances of the year, honestly. Like, I love Adam Driver. He's one of the best working. I don't agree at all that he's been picking bad projects. Like you're saying, he's just picking up an insane filmography of like directors that he's working with, and only a couple of them have been misses, honestly.
Yeah, I think Adam Driver is one of the best actors working today. I think he's very selective with the directors he chooses to work with. Not always. Like, we've seen him do films that obviously are paycheck movies, but he wants to work with great directors. And like, he's done like Scorsese's passion project with Silence, and now he's taking on the lead role of Coppola's passion project. And like, I think the performances in this film are really, really great. Like, I actually don't think there's really a bad performance in here. And I know some people have criticized the performances, and Coppola, I heard, bring up such a great example, which was that originally The Godfather Part 2, there was a lot more cross-cutting than we see in the final version. And everyone was criticizing the performances of the film, saying Godfather 2 has such horrible performances. And obviously today, we know that these are performances that got award nominations and won awards and are frequently praised. And all Coppola changed was the structure of the film to where people enjoyed the film more now. So now everyone praises the performances when they were the exact same ones that were originally criticized. And I think there is this problem with criticism. I bring it up every Oscar season, where when people don't like the film, they kind of tend to discredit every area of the film, where like, even if you don't like Megalopolis, are you really going to criticize the lighting of the film? Are you going to criticize the wardrobe or the hair and makeup, which obviously did a very impressive job, like just because you didn't like the narrative or the story? So I think that's a common problem we see with not just fans, but the Oscars as a whole will choose to not recognize this film for categories that clearly did some of the best work in, just because they don't like the plot or the narrative. But back to the performances, when you watch someone like Adam Driver, just watch the way he uses his hands in this film. Like, Adam Driver is an actor who really does transform the way he moves his body in just about every film that he does. And the way he uses his hands in really subtle ways, where like when he's when Julia comes over and says like, "Hey, I wrote you a childish letter last night." Like, he has like this long extension and like dropping of the letters in a dramatic way, and it's really subtle things that people don't notice like that. But when you see the subtle ways that Adam Driver moves his body to express the way that the character's feeling in that moment, are so different from kind of the standard approach that a lot of other actors would take. And I think Natalie Emmanuel really brings like so much charm and is showcasing the star power she has in this role. Her facial acting, I think, is top tier in this film. She expresses so much through her face constantly throughout the runtime. I think just as a whole, I thought the entire cast was really impressive. Lawrence Fishburne has like the most perfect narrator voice that you could hear, aside from like a Morgan Freeman. Like, his voice is perfect. Aubrey Plaza does a great job with that role, where she's just like this almost comedically, like, will do anything to rise and gain power. John Voight, when he's like, "Look at this boner," like, that's what comedic timing. The way he said it was perfect.
I lost it in that scene.
That scene was so funny. Shia LaBeouf perfectly captures like this horny sleazebag character. Like, he's so like invested and consumed in the role. I know I'm forgetting people, but yeah, I think the entire like the group of actors that assembled for this film, a film that they likely read the script and didn't understand the film. The fact that they still would take this on, I think, says a lot about Coppola as a director, that this many talented actors wanted to work with him. And I really do think the result is incredible, because I think this is one of the best ensembles of the year, even though it won't be recognized for it.
Yeah, the comedic range of the cast. I love that people are saying that every actor feels like they're acting in a different film. Just the different like personalities and line deliveries. That like every line, you don't know the way they're going to deliver it. It's different, and it's it's absolute chaos, and it's just a wonderful surprise. I think Aubrey Plaza was just made for that role. Just the name, Wow Platinum. The names are ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. I can't remember, what did she say? Like, where did she get it from? It was like some train station.
A train station or something.
Oh no, he answered on Twitter. He met someone's grandmother that was called Wow or something, and that's where he got the inspiration from it as well.
No, I'm saying like her excuse in the film, like where she got her name
from. Yeah.
I think it was some
that was where he got the inspiration for like the actual character.
Shia LaBeouf, obviously a pretty awful human being, but he does play this character very well. And John Voight was having the time of his life. Him in the Colosseum sequence, he's just so drunk. He's just rambling absolute nonsense the entire time. And he was, oh my goodness, man. He might have been the comedic highlight of the film for me. That whole Colosseum sequence as a whole is just absurd. Like you were saying, that like the whole fake the Virgin thing with Grace Vanderwall, who obviously you got famous, was it from America's Got Talent, that ukulele girl? That's where she got her fame from, and now is does kind of music in general. But yeah, that was so funny. Just that see-through dress that she just kept exclaiming about, and that
kind very on the nose what he's going for. Just start screaming, you can see right through me.
You can see right through me. It's so funny. And then that we kind of get to that kind of, it's not even an auction, it's like they're like bidding to who can give the biggest donations to this fake virgin's cause for absolutely no reason, and then like Dustin Hoffman like holds up his thing, and they've all got QR codes on, which I think is hilarious instead of numbers. Dustin Hoffman's character is an interesting one. I just like how he's just been throwing in all these famous people into these roles, and his Dustin Hoffman's death might be the funniest part of this film. Like, is the split second off screen death. We just don't see him for a while, and it's like a quick 2-second cut to him getting crushed to death, and then just cuts away, and that's the last we've heard of him. It's so funny.
The weirdest one was probably Talia Shear. Like when she's just randomly appears after he's like got shot. I don't. Is this just like Coppola having like weird dreams and he just put it in? Like it's so random how she just randomly appears.
Because I knew there was someone I was forgetting when I was going through the cast, and that is the great Giancarlo Esposito. He also gives a really great performance as well. So he's someone I also forgot to mention. But actually, because you mentioned, sorry, what were you saying?
He like finally, I feel like he kind of broke out that Breaking Bad bro with this kind of being typecast as like the normal villain, because this is like bordering more on like his do the right thing character, where it's like really funny. Like he had great comedic timing in this movie.
He's had such an interesting career. He just does the worst roles now. He just the same things. He just feel like he's a bit of a bag chaser at the moment. But I was happy to see him do something different. Something we expect from him normally. But yeah, over recent years, and I don't know, he just continues to, just his projects. I know I've been defending people slandering Adam Driver, but I'm going to slander Giancarlo Esposito because I really liked him in this, but yeah, recently I don't know where he's been, man.
That's true.
And Jason Schwartzman's so just there.
He's just there.
He's like, hey, can I get a picture?
Oh dear. It's crazy because you've got all these kind of incredible actors, Jason Schwartzman, incredible actor, Dustin Hoffman, obviously he's had so many famous roles, and you're just kind of chucking him in for these tiny pieces. You know, you're just gonna be there in the background. We get that scene where it's like, who is his mum? No, I forgot to remember who. Catherine Hunter just starts dancing with that guy, and he just gets on the drums and just starts playing the drums out of nowhere, just randomly. But yeah, don't know what else I was going to say.
Yeah, the cast is just crazy. It's mental reading who he was initially going to cast in those, because I think it was like 2000 or something. He like done like a script reading for it and had like De Niro, Uma Thurman, Paul Newman, like DiCaprio, Nicolas Cage. Like it's crazy what it could have ended up being if it didn't take so long to get this made.
Yeah, and I'll say in terms of like, obviously this is not a character study or a character piece. This is not Taxi Driver that is diving in depth with its characters psychologically, although it is very much diving in depth with the Caesar character a lot more than people I think are giving it credit for. But I'll say this, like, I actually did buy into the romance of the film. Like, obviously it's done in a very like stage play, Shakespearean theatrical way rather than like more realism. But like, I thought they had good chemistry. I thought that they, I bought into that relationship. I thought both of their performances, they did a very good job. And I think Caesar's a very interesting character because I think he very much reflects Coppola with this film of like just getting lost in creativity and the creativity distract from this emotional trauma. And like this innate desire to create is what his motivation really is, aside from distracting from the death of his wife. But I think that, like one of the greatest things that human beings are capable of doing on this earth is creating, whether that's artistically or whether it's architecture or, there's so many different ways to create in life. And I think that just the character's pure desire to create and ultimately, like I think people are often going into this film like, what's the message of this film? And I think that we're wrongly conditioned to think like every film has to have a message. I think this film is more about the search for answers than it is presenting us answers. And I don't think Coppola is necessarily giving us like this message for the whole film. Obviously there is some level of a message, but like, I think it's more about the search for an answer rather than an answer itself, where this is a character who's trying to find a better future. And I think part of why I bought into the romance is because what really attracts him to Julia and attract Julia to Caesar is both of them fall in love with each other's imagination of a better future, and like just the high of creating and this desire to create and find a search for a better future. And I think it's much more about the endless search for the answer rather than the answer of what that better future is itself, which I find really interesting and leaves you with a lot to think about.
Yeah, I think Caesar was a lot better than people were giving credit for him to. Yeah, I mean, it pretty much it is a stand-in for Coppola. Like you're saying, I mean, Coppola spoke about a lot. About he has two regrets for his life. One of them was that he didn't shoot a film in one continuous take like he wanted to do, and One from the Heart. And two was that his generation of filmmakers didn't leave the state of film in a better place. The Megalopolis that he's trying to make is like a stand-in for the movie industry for Coppola. Coppola came up in the 70s where like he came up with all the great American filmmakers. Looking what it is now must be just disastrous in comparison, compared to that. Like most of the directors are either retired or working outside the system, and it's only for this self-funded epic that he's got back into like the mainstream spotlights. Like you're saying, it's not really, it's the message is very in your face in ways. It's not and like nuanced really, but there's a lot of comparisons to it's a very optimistic view of what Coppola's hoping for the future, really.
Yeah, a lot of this film I kind of saw as like a massive amalgamation of past, present, and future. And I think for me, that's kind of what I get as the big kind of message of this film. And as the kind of film goes on, that kind of becomes more of a singularity. And I love those triptych images that kind of split in three. And for some of the shots, they're kind of split up. And then for some of the shots, they're kind of all as one, but the bars, the splitting of those are still there, and they're all kind of moving between the two. And I think that's kind of important to kind of the whole film's narrative as they're going on. They're trying to find this future, and I think that's kind of what it achieves in the end. And just those kind of, like I said before, those whole sequences after he gets shot, that kind of shot when he takes off his bandage and we get kind of the heads behind him was absolutely glorious. And I think the kind of the whole subplot with his wife as well, emotionally, I think it works very, very well. This guy kind of so stuck in the past that he can't really achieve, well, he can't necessarily kind of focus on the future, and he's just moving nowhere in the present. And he kind of, after that kind of happens, he's kind of just starting to move on away from that. And I know I've seen people slandering Natalia Emmanuel as well. I think she's fantastic. I really do. We haven't kind of seen her. I'm trying to think when was the last. Obviously famous for Game of Thrones.
Fast X, was she not in?
But yeah, she's in Fast and Furious franchise, isn't she? But I really, really did like her.
I just got to say, I didn't know people were criticizing her performance.
Yeah, people. I just think people slander her as an actress in general. People don't like the way she delivers lines.
It's that
I think it's
they
crazy.
released that scene where she goes to him for the letter on digital, and people are saying it's like room level acting, and I just don't get what people are watching.
If I see another comment saying this looks like a glorified perfume ad, I'm gonna murder somebody. I've seen so many.
I didn't understand like any of the really dialogue complaints when I first watched. Like, I loved that scene. Like that is pretty much a oneer, that whole scene. Like right up to before the point where people are making fun of. It's a great scene, and I really just wasn't even really paying attention to the dialogue. Honestly, that whole much. I was just looking where the camera was going. That like whole just waiting when he was going to end the oneer.
Go back to the club. So
it's so funny. How are you looking at as bad? It's like purposely funny.
It's so good.
Like, how you not seeing that as like something that Driver is doing?
And then she's like, entitles me. She's just repeating that. And that's the thing. There's random bits of characters repeating the same words 3 times in a row, and that happens multiple times in the film. Dustin Hoffman does it in that scene at the beginning. Natalia Emmanuel does it there, and yeah, there's a lot of, like I said, the kind of triptych dialogue and images that we see throughout this film. Yeah, his dialogue just made that scene between Aubrey Plaza and Adam Driver at the beginning, where she's like, "You're anal, but I'm oral." That's, like you just don't hear that, and the thing, yeah, Aubrey Plaza plays that role so well, just right from the off. Just playing this incredibly oversharing reporter almost, and just really does not care. And I think the other actors and their performances, despite everyone being so different, it manages to balance, like I described before, as this harmonious chaos. But yeah, just hilarious stuff, to be honest.
Yeah, real quick, I got to say, because I thought Natalie Emmanuel's performance was like a standout to me. I thought like her facial acting was great, and I don't like read as much criticism, I think, as a lot of other people do. And I think it's highlighting something like what you're both telling me based on what people are criticizing about her performance. I think it highlights the problem of like, I love Letterboxd, it's doing a lot of great things, but like when people see certain criticisms that now they're looking for them, we're like, I hadn't heard any criticism for her performance, so I went in and thought it was good. Where like if someone tells you, "Oh, she's terrible in the movie," then you're kind of nitpicking it more and are expecting it to be expecting it to not be very good. Where like I thought the scene that with the card between them, I thought that was a good scene. Like I thought it worked. I think is it like necessarily grounded in realism? No, it's like we've talked about. It's theatrical. It's a little like not Shakespearean, but it feels like a stage play to a degree, which is the direction Coppola is going for. And I think that's the same way with the scores of the film. Like, I knew there would be people who don't like this film. I didn't think it would be this bad. And I think a lot of that is people start seeing 1 stars and they feel comfortable giving it a 1 star. Like, I'll this way, if everyone's giving this film 4 stars, a lot of those people who gave it 1 stars are going to give it like a 2.5. That's kind of the point I'm making here.
You know what else were we really playing into the fact of these low scores is what will general audiences be going for us for like the only reason it'll be because the director of The Godfather has made a new film and that's what they'll be going into expecting, and you can not root down to Coppola's style down to The Godfather because every film has been different. Like we've been saying, like Godfather is nothing like this. It's the more classical American epic style. Then he's got Apocalypse Now. It's controlled chaos. Dracula is dark and fantastical. One from the Heart. It's maybe a little bit more like this. It's like live theater, like One from the Heart. Like, and Megalopolis takes like all of these elements, not just these well-known films. It takes it from these very experimental movies more recently. So I guess if you're more akin to that style, it's easier to digest as well. But something that I love that he does, he always like the setting and the style that he does, it's always related to the kind of film that he's making. Like for One from the Heart, it's set in Las Vegas, and that's not only because he got to make like great sets for that, it's because he saw that as the perfect place for a love story. And Megalopolis is a story, I feel, about a lot of things. I feel like it's like grief, love, about the future, time. I think New York is a pretty great setting for that. It's not only a great modern comparison to ancient Rome, but it's a city in the world that is especially went through quite a lot of disasters and stuff. And like we've seen that in the film, like obviously 9/11 is a part of the film, where he's even got like clips of it from back then. That's how long he's been making this film. He's actual own footage from 9/11 that he inserts into the film. It's a city that's known of coming together in those kind of hard times, and I think he uses that quite well throughout the film. There's like the satellite that falls to the planet, and it was kind of moved on by quite quickly, but the kind of rebuilding of the city feels quite right for New York and that. And that's kind of the heart of the film, I think. Caesar moving on from the death of his wife, which, I mean, I don't think he changed any of it after his wife actually died. It was kind of weirdly fitting, kind of playing into the twixt where he was kind of grieving his son's death, weirdly. But I don't think any of that was changed after her death, and kind of looking to build a better future for the life of his children. And I think the way he kind of approaches that is very earnest and open, and I think most audiences don't really like that. They're not receptive to it in general, that kind of narrative, even in other films.
Yeah, with like with The Substance, our last episode where we talked about using cities as characters, this does it in, I guess, a more broad way, because that's the whole idea of the film. But again, it works. It just works so well. with what Coppola's going for. Just the way he shoots every aspect of the city is he it's all different. The look and feel to the film, you know, the bits I talked about before, the moving statues, kind of that tunnel into it. Then you get some of the more outer ones where you kind of get this golden glow that comes down like from the top of the screen, like it's real golden light to it, and it has that kind of more digital feel that looks more like real life. And then we get kind of those CGI kind of more like green screen sequences when he's first showing her his kind of vision, and she's like walking blindfolded across that table, and we get those cuts into kind of what she's imagining, those sequences there. And I just think it's so fascinating the way he's shooting kind of each individual aspect of those and how he's making the city look. We kind of get these golden looks at the beginning, like that very first opening shot. We get kind of top of kind of what looks like a criminal justice building of sorts. Is it the Chrysler building, that opening one where he's on top of? Yeah, thought so. And yeah, and just the changes in color. There's a lot of kind of goldens, and then later down the line, we kind of get the shift in lighting to kind of these reds and blues, specifically in that sequence with the satellite crashing down. That one shot where they're by the window and the camera kind of zooms in into their reflections on the window is so beautiful. And yeah, it looks great. And about maybe one of the best shots is the asteroids are coming down, the shadows on the buildings being reflected by the light, just absolutely brilliant, just joyous to see, honestly.
Yeah, in terms of the filmmaking, there's so much versatility here, and I know some people are like, I don't go to a movie for technical aspects, this and that. And, like, maybe you don't, but like I think that like I said, this is a visual art form, and I love the art form of photography and the art form of painting. So like I want to see people who are experimenting and doing creative things visually when I go to a film. And there's just such a versatility of style. We have really great like close-up shots. We have really great wide shots. We have like quick cutting montage. We have like the scene Ryan talked about where it's like this theatrical blocking and in a long take. This film really does shine. Like there's so much shine and the reflections of light like to this film. There's a lot of like shininess to it, create like kind of like a glossier texture like we see from David Lynch sometimes. And yeah, there's really so much with the whole stylistically that he's doing. We have those great shots where like we have the dust particles floating in the air and like some smoke to it, which really creates a distinct kind of dreamlike atmosphere where it almost has like an underwater type of feeling, which I really like a lot. What else does he do? Just the world building's incredible, like Oscar talked about. He really knows how to paint with both light and his production design and the wardrobe. Like most of the men wear dark colors or black colors, but like the women are often wearing bright, vibrant colors. Like Julia, played by Natalie Emmanuel, wears different shades of green very often. And he also knows how to paint with light, like that whole driving sequence where she's following him in the rain. Like obviously that's the style of photography that I like. So I'm of course going to love those scenes, whether it's like Oscar talked about, that split lighting in the exteriors there or in the interiors at the Coliseum. And there's, you know, fast scenes, there's slow scenes, there's loud scenes, there's quiet scenes. He's just utilizing every filmmaking tool that you possibly can. He's using the hair and makeup. He's using set design. He's using lighting. There's just so much style to the film. There's like the more intimate scenes that we see, and then there's big scale spectacle scenes. And also things like, you know, he's using digital technology, which maybe didn't like the CGI, but he's using, you know, practical effects, whether it's like that scene in the beginning where the model of the city shakes, or it's some of the CGI scenes that we see in the film. And I just like that. Oh, and then of course the creative split screen that I think Oscar mentioned, where he's using split screen really creatively. He's always been someone who liked kind of these semi-dissolve of like overlapping images. You see that a lot in Apocalypse Now and Bram Stoker's Dracula, which of course he's going to use here, along with this kind of poetic cross-cutting that he likes to use a lot. The most famous would be the baptism scene of The Godfather, or the I won't say the scene he uses it for in Apocalypse Now, because that creates that I can't say it without spoiling that movie. But yeah, I think, just like I said, like, he's a filmmaker who is trying to do creative things, and I love the versatility in his visual style here. And it's not just like the images are nice to look at; they're nice to look at each one for different reasons, and he's using different tools and different techniques to make them, like, there's such versatility. When you look at, it's not like, okay, the image looks nice, but they all look nice for the same reason, because of a consistent tone. There's such a variety and versatility if you were to lay out all the images of this film, which I really appreciate.
Yeah, that split screen towards the end was one of my favorite shots in the film. Like, there's that one, like, you know how they were like blending between each other, like kind of like they were kind of going over the line of the split screen. It's like there's a moment when Caesar's like in the middle and both sides like form a triangle around them, and I think that's one of the best shots in the film. That's taken from Napoleon, like the 1927 version as well.
Yeah,
That's
it
just
is.
such a great moment at the end of that film where it
Oh
uses
man,
a similar technique.
that's
Did
like
any of you look at the letterbox list he made for his inspirations?
Let me
So
get it up a sec.
he had that. A couple of the ones that I
Bliss.
noticed,
I
like
didn't
the actual inspirations, like he had like the red shoes. That kind of plays into like the theatrical side of the film I was talking about, and as well as like how colourful it is, like those red and blue colours they use, and that drug freak out scene in the Colosseum was so good.
Yeah, it's definitely that kind of ending sequence to Napoleon is kind of one of the most absurd, kind of just crazy things at the time. You kind of filmmakers at the time trying to almost get the first kind of widescreen shot with what Abel Gance was trying to do. Trying to extend the frame of kind of three different sections, three split screens, and for 1927, that is absolutely insane. And when Comic-Con did that, I did think of that, and it just made me smile, because Napoleon is one of my favorite films ever.
Yeah, it's
real quick, I
crazy
just want
stuff.
to clarify
Napoleon.
for everyone, he's talking about the 1927 Napoleon.
Yeah, I'm talking about the 1927
might be confused.
5.5 hour silent film Napoleon, not Ridley Scott's Napoleon. And Coppola, he also mentions obviously references to Spartacus and Ben-Hur, that as he mentioned
it's
around
very
this, obviously the
self-explanatory.
Colosseum sequences. He also references Eyes Wide Shut as well, which I think is really interesting. Obviously, Eyes Wide Shut, a very kind of subtly horrifying film about the elitists of Hollywood and what they get up to at their parties. And I think that's a really, really interesting comparison to make, honestly.
I think the most interesting one is that he names Chungking Express as an inspiration.
I was just about to say that.
I was about to
that's obviously a lot of the use of time with Wong Kar-wai.
Yeah,
as well as kind of moving on from the heartbreak of his wife. There's a lot of stuff.
I was literally. Yeah, I think the bits about characters and just the way Chungking Express kind of does its story. Obviously, we kind of move on from one relationship in that film just to complete another one in the second half of the film. An aspect of the film that throws a lot of people off. But yeah, works pretty. He also mentions his persona as well, which is another kind of reality kind of blending film. About two women and their kind of mental kind of status and who they are, and the Invisible Man as well as another one he mentioned.
It's like when Caesar takes off his bandage.
Yeah.
I want to talk briefly about his influence at Chungking Express, which of course is like one of my top 3 favorite films ever. And of course, part of that is that lost love and rebounding from a love that you lost is, of course, a huge part of that. But Wong Kar-wai is no filmmaker explores the concept of time like he does. And clearly, it's impossible to watch Megalopolis without being aware of that concept of time, which I think is the core of the idea. And of course, Coppola is someone who has to be really feeling the ticking clock at the age he's at, which is why he was willing to self-finance and just get this film made. And I think a big theme of this film, in terms of what this film's exploring thematically, is someone who has this desire to create and, leave a legacy behind through what he creates, but at the same time is feeling that ticking clock and therefore kind of goes off into this dream world of his mind that I think the film was exploring, where there is no ticking clock. And when you're creating, you're not aware of the sense of time, and it can go forward, backwards. You can think about the future. You can have elements of the past and have it all kind of blend together. And I think that is one of the most core elements of this film, that like this does, in terms of one of those like core through line elements of this film, I think the biggest one would be that concept of time.
Yeah, I really agree. I love films that present their world as like this timeless void. One of my favorite films, Demons by Toshio Matsumoto, does that exactly. We kind of, this whole film is centered around this kind of area, and there's a lot of kind of black negative space. Very different use to this, but that kind of world is kind of, we don't really have a sense of time, and I feel like that's so central to what the film is trying to say, how it's lost in itself, and it's trying to find its kind of position almost. And Adam Driver's character kind of is that kind of holding piece together. And we kind of get, there's a lot of kind of time jumps, especially kind of later down the line, she becomes pregnant, and then the baby's just there by the time, and he has his Garden of Eden, his utopia, his megalopolis kind of built by the end of everything. But yeah, I think that's thrown a lot of people off. They're kind of skipping from place to place towards that kind of end sequence. But I think it works brilliantly.
I love that first time jump where they have the dissolves of the calendar like next to the characters' faces.
So good.
Something that we somehow haven't mentioned as well, the fact that Adam Driver has like a superpower where he can just stop time.
People are nitpicking that so much. It is crazy. People are like, "Oh, but why do you have this superpower? What's the point?" I think Adam Driver is such a reflection of Coppola himself in this film, and that he's kind of a reflection of Coppola getting this film made is what Adam Driver is trying to achieve with him building his utopia. And that's kind of his utopia is literally just this film. That's for me, that's what I kind of see it as Adam Driver is Francis Ford Coppola in this film. And I love when the kind of some of the meanings behind films that like the directors are like kind of almost responsible or reflected in their own films. Michael Haneke does it a lot, where he kind of positions himself as this kind of unseen character and part of this film. One of my favorite films by him, Cache, I think that does that absolutely brilliantly. But yeah, really, really, really enjoyed that kind of those parts of the stopping time usage. And I think one of my favorite lines, "A Nobel Prize doesn't expire." I think that was brilliant. But yeah, I think Coppola like writes himself into that kind of into Adam Driver's character very well.
Yeah, my favorite line was the guy that invented pigs in blankets should have won a Nobel Prize.
My favorite actually was, I think, something that relates to that Adam Driver being like essentially like a stand-in for Coppola's mind in some ways, where my favorite line was, he said, "There's only two things you can't stare at too long, and one is the sun and the other is your own soul." And clearly a lot of this is Coppola staring deeply into his own soul. He doesn't portray the Adam Driver character as a hero. He portrays him as a character who a lot of people see as more of like an evil man. I mean, I guess you could say somewhat heroic towards the end, but I think he is definitely very critical of the character in this kind of cold, emotionless, no like meaningful relationships in his life because he's so consumed with his work. And I think that I like that he's willing to explore parts of his mind in a more flawed way. But because we talked about, you mentioned the superpower of manipulating time. God forbid you don't explain the rules of how everything works in boring exposition.
No.
But I think that kind of comes back to another influence he listed, which is Eyes Wide Shut, which, like the Fellini, Kurosawa, Bergman films we mentioned, this is a finale work of a great director, and it dabbles in surrealism. And Kubrick had a saying, which was when people would say, "Well, what does this mean?" He said, "We'll let the French critics decide that." Where like he didn't. Coppola's playing the long game here. He's not worried about immediate success. He wants this to be something that you look back on and analyze for generations to come. And Kubrick was very the same way, where he would leave a lot of things open-ended, which is part of why Kubrick, I think, has such a popularity today is because whether it's The Shining, 2001, Eyes Wide Shut, whatever it might be, there's so much it leaves you to think about because it doesn't spoon feed you a reason for everything. David Lynch is another one who loves to do this, where he leaves ambiguous things for you to talk about. And I think Coppola is doing a lot of that here, where he's leaving us things to talk about and analyze because he doesn't want to just tell us an idea or tell us what to think or give us a plot with a conclusion. What he wants to do is inspire, and he wants to inspire young filmmakers, and he wants to trigger our imagination and get us to start thinking about the film and inspire us to think about some of these ideas, not tell us what to think, but to get us thinking and generate conversation. I think he's trying to inspire us rather than just give us answers and tell us what he thinks.
Yeah, it kind of plays into my favorite line of the movie. My actual favorite line of it is artists can never lose their control of time, and I feel like is going to play into that. Like, even long after he's gone, people are going to be looking back at this film and reading into what it's saying. It's also just a very useful film, I think, as well. It's not the type of film that you'd expect is made from like an 80-year-old man near his death, at least stylistically. It's very modern.
Yeah, it kind of does feel like old man ramblings, though. But I mean that in a complimentary way. Yeah, that kind of the beam sequence when they're kind of up on top of the skyscraper, that looks incredible. Like you mentioned before, I love the way that he makes like the city look down below. And again, I've just seen people like nitpick. Oh, why is the clock there? What's the clock doing? Why is it floating? Just give over, man.
Why?
Just give over. Honestly. But yeah, I also, like you're saying, Alex, I think that the central core relationship is really, really good in this film, especially from that kind of the sequence on those beams and how she is like almost an extension of what he is, because he kind of loses his power, and it's because of her that he kind of finds his ability and his kind of strive for the future and for time again. And again, I just see Coppola all over that as himself and as a filmmaker, and kind of finding where his kind of place is almost.
Yeah, he gets it back. It's like not really explained, but it's like love, and I feel like people don't really like those like sappy kind of narrative choices in films.
You know, people seem to be very turned off by something that's like new or is not familiar a lot of the time, where it's, you know, he's presenting you something that is making you think and is not what you're expecting when you walk into a movie theater most of the time. And for some people, that is going to turn them away, that everything's not spoon-fed and that it's not doing a traditional narrative. But I think that the test of time tends to be very kind to these films. And like I said, he's playing the long game here, which I like to see. And for me, this flew through the runtime, honestly. Like, I literally had to piss, and like I didn't want to get up because I was so like caught up in it. And then once the Coliseum scene came, I'm like, all right, like I gotta hold it, because I love that Coliseum sequence. It's just a total indulging in like spectacle of all different kinds, and honestly shows us how, for a film that is exploring the concept of time, how some things really don't change, whether it's the chariot races of ancient Rome that we see like in Ben-Hur versus like WWE or like a pop star concert. It's all kind of, he really is showing us kind of the similarities to all of these different forms of spectacle. And even though society has changed so much, that there are some things that really haven't changed.
Yeah, the end of that Colosseum scene was like the only thing that really gave me a bad taste in my mouth, because I get going back to his old man rambles. I felt like it was kind of like talking about cancel culture, and it's like it's not a good look.
What are you referring to?
Considering the stuff that you
Oh,
said in the
the
past.
scandal.
Yeah, the way the Adam Driver like gets semi-cancelled, and then like it gets found out that like it's not. And then, I don't know, it's just weird, especially with Coppola's past. And the fact that he kept making a big deal that he hired Shia LaBeouf and John Voight to be in this movie. I don't know, it was just a bit weird.
It sucks that they were kind of fit their roles well, considering the people that they are.
I gotta really disagree with both of you here. I actually, for me, that was a big strength of the film, and I think that Coppola is doing an exploration about the future and humanity kind of coming together. So I do think it was. I like how he was bringing a lot of people with different viewpoints together to collectively create something together. Because I think a big message of the film is people coming together to create and what human beings can create together. So I actually for me, that was something that I enjoyed about the film, that he was in a time, especially right now, that being an election year where everyone is so divided, he was kind of trying to bring people together. As for the scandal scene, I thought it was also interesting because like what I saw there, I'm like Disney pop stars, like Miley Cyrus, where they're like this innocent image and then turn into like the ultimate like punk rock kind of image. So for me, that was actually one of the highlights of the film. I think that's a very contemporary topic, and I like that he was exploring it.
I don't know. It was nice seeing John Voight and Dustin Hoffman on the screen together again. That was a nice add on to that.
Yeah, like I said, I don't think this film has a couple big ideas like creativity and time, but I think it's also a collection of smaller ideas where like that pop star scene of like that's like this one little moment that never really comes back. It has nothing to do with much before or after, but it goes back to the thing of the narrative of like it's a collection of ideas rather than just one through line message the whole film. So I think it is kind of interesting as like this because the film's epic. It's like this one big epic portrait of a lot of different ideas.
Yeah, that is definitely why people thought it was messy, because he just brings in narrative ideas and then he kind of drops them like 10 minutes in, but he does have that through line of the Adam Driver character that I think keeps it in controlled in some way. It doesn't go off the rails completely.
Yeah, I just also love whenever a director just dives into spectacle. I love the musical number as well. Like I love how he just throws a musical number in there. I'm like, you know what? Like I'm here for this. Like I'm here to just watch some good spectacle for 30 minutes of the film, whatever that entire Coliseum sequence was.
That kind of the mini cut, we get the Grace's character again. It's like 2000 mini 2000s music video sequence, and it's you just go like throwing in like the headlines like teen pregnancies suddenly rise, and all these stupid news headlines getting found. There's like fire explosions in the background, like the the digital look to it. Oh, it's so funny. It's so random. Oh dear.
But that's like this. How many teen pop stars have we seen that exact evolution happen for? It's like they're like the most innocent image, and all of a sudden something happens, and it's just a complete 180 in terms of their public image. So we hope that we've given you enough to maybe want to rewatch Megalopolis, maybe look at it a little deeper, differently on a rewatch, and appreciate this film because yes, we understand it's not the traditional narrative that many of you might enjoy when you're watching a film, but he's really trying to do something new, trying to move the art form forward and do creative things. So we really recommend that you revisit this film with try to keep your mindset a little more open, look at the film from a bit of a fresher perspective because there's just so much to take in here. There's so much brilliance on display. And I think that Coppola also I'd recommend checking out Coppola's filmography kind of in order and then getting to it more towards the end of it. But do we want to go into our Q&A? So we do a Q&A just about every week. There's a link in the description below where you can ask us questions. We normally try to limit it to about 5 a week. So if your question doesn't get answered, don't worry. We will definitely get to it on a future episode. But starting us off this week, let's start with this question because it deals with Megalopolis. This is from Cash from the Film Scoop podcast. Shout out to them. Name a more disjointed and choppy narrative than Megalopolis.
Literally. Oh dear.
Deadpool 3.
Yeah, Deadpool 3.
I don't think it's choppy and disjointed.
It's choppy.
I just don't get that side of it at all.
It's not really a narrative is the thing. So like it's kind of counterpoint to the like you're saying it's a choppy narrative, but it's a film that wasn't very interested in narrative. It's kind of like asking a sushi chef to make you pizza. It's like it's just not what that's not what he's doing here. But in terms of a film with a very choppy narrative, I mean, the first one I would think of would be Fellini's Omnicord, which is another kind of later in their career work from a great director where they're just not interested in narrative. It's a lot of little like subplots and tangents. So I would go with Fellini's Omnicord, which is one of my favorite films ever.
Southland Tales. I think Cash has seen it though.
Yeah, Southland Tales, but Cash is asking it in like a negative way. Southland Tales is very good. It is disjointed, but I mean it works for that film perfectly.
From Alan, top 5 working directors.
Top 5 working directors. Technically, David Lynch is still working, so that's number 1.
What are we classifying as working though? Because I actually put David Lynch on there technically. Like he hasn't done anything.
Are we doing working? Made something in like the last 3 years or 2 years?
Give it 5 because like all right, the last 5 years
he's made a short film in the last 5 years,
or has something scheduled to come out. Like so Bong Joon-ho hasn't done anything since 2019, but he has
David Lynch has made a short film in the last 5 years. I'm taking that.
Wait, what's the short film again? What's it?
The monkey one on Netflix.
Oh, that was the last 5 years. That does not count.
Wait, was that last 5 years?
That's not 5 years. I think that's
okay.
all.
Maybe it wasn't. Okay, we're not counting him as working.
No.
Terrence Malick is number 1 for me, without a doubt. Hopefully, there's a new film coming out. It should be released next year. Then probably Paul Thomas Anderson. For me, let's have a think. I need to get my
one Scorsese.
Yeah, go ahead.
Juan Kar-wai did a show. Are we counting him, or is he off of it?
No, he counts. He'll make another film.
Then Scorsese, Kar-wai, Linklater, Tarantino, and
I think Coppola's might be on mine.
Chazelle and Spielberg.
Yeah, Chazelle.
Thank you.
There's Raimi, Tarantino. Does De Palma count? He did say he's making a new film.
He did say he is rumored to be making another film.
Oh fuck! I forgot Lynch though. Fuck.
No, Lynch doesn't count.
No, we said Lynch doesn't count. Michael Mann, I'd have on there. I think Park Chan-wook, I would as well. Yeah, but I think for me, Terrence Malick is number 1 without a doubt.
Yeah, if De Palma counts, I'm putting him in there, and then Scorsese and James Cameron.
Interesting.
Coppola is like 6, maybe 5. I don't know.
It's a very tough question because there's so many great ones. It's hard. It's at least he narrowed it to current directors would be even harder. Next question we have from Joe. Seasonal question with it being October. What is the greatest horror sequel of all time? And why is it Rob Zombie's Halloween 2?
It's not.
That's a great film. Nah. Fire Walk with Me is not a sequel. Greatest horror sequel. That is a good answer.
For me, it's easily Evil Dead 2.
This is a Ryan question.
Evil Dead 2 is a good show. I need to get my horror lists up 1 second.
Evil Dead 2 might even be my pick. I mean, Aliens doesn't count. It's technically
Aliens is not a horror film.
Yeah, that's not a horror movie. That doesn't count.
Well, it's 100% a horror film. It's a horror film.
Aliens, the sequel?
Yeah.
Alien Covenant.
I'm taking that.
Oh, that's Alien Covenant is a prequel.
Alien
Covenant is technically a prequel and a sequel. Alien Covenant might be my answer.
Yeah, if Aliens isn't horror, Covenant isn't horror.
Covenant is a horror. Definitely.
I haven't seen Covenant.
They both are horror.
Aliens is not a horror film.
I mean, Evil Dead 2, I guess. Yeah, I'm not the guy for this.
I would have Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 up there. I love that film.
You know he has Rob Zombie's Halloween above the original Halloween.
Because it's better than the original Halloween.
It's sacrilegious to say that.
No, it's not. The original Halloween is a good film and nothing more.
That's a hot take.
It's an all-timer.
I'm not a horror guy. I guess Pearl. I like Pearl a lot. I might take that.
Ty West is a bit of a hack.
You don't like Ty West?
It's not
Because
true.
Maxine left a bad taste.
Maxine was awful. Maxine is absolutely
It
horrendous.
wasn't awful. It wasn't great.
It was awful. It was
wasn't
so
awful.
bad.
There
There's so
were
much
many
more
worse
films that came out
movies
this
this
year.
year.
Yeah, exactly.
There has been worse movies this year, but that was an absolute stinker.
And just some honorable mentions for sequels. I think Army of Darkness as well, if we're not just counting the second or the first sequel. Exorcist 3, that's an underrated one.
Good pick.
Our final question is, what's a movie you did not start expecting much, but finished deeply moved emotionally? Off the top of my head, based on recent watches, it would be a Coppola movie, but not a Francis Ford Coppola movie, a Sofia Coppola movie, being The Virgin Suicides. I expected a good movie, but I really, really loved this when I ended up watching that film. So off the top of my head, I would say that.
On the topic of Francis Ford Coppola, I thought The Conversation was quite tragic. And I really loved that film. I did not expect that kind of a level kind of emotion you kind of get at the end is kind of really great story and paranoia. But I think it really delivers a good level of emotion to kind of his whole mental state.
I thought that one was a snoozer. I'm not.
Yeah, it's slow paced, but
It's so good.
I wish I liked it more. Hopefully, I'll like it more on a rewatch.
I love that film.
Fallen Leaves is another one. Like I really enjoy. I really love that one where I'm just like, all right, not just saying another movie, but I really loved it.
just from this year, I'd say like Challengers maybe. I didn't expect that to be like the best or close to the best of the year going into it.
I'm tripping. Red Rooms fucked me up. Like I didn't. Like, I literally like my head was fucked up for days after that. Like I was like, I've been in other movies taking notes on Red Rooms since I saw it. Like I'll watch another movie and I'll start thinking about Red Rooms. Like I think, yeah, I don't know if it moved me emotionally. It more like fucked me up emotionally, but yeah, that's definitely one. All right, that wraps up our questions for the week. If you have a question for us, just drop it in the link in the description below. But yeah, thank you for listening. Like, subscribe, comment, all that stuff. Let us know what you thought about Megalopolis. Feel free to tell us how dumb we all are and how the movie's awful, even though you're wrong. Feel free to let us know in the comments. And next week, we'll probably be covering a film you agree with us on a little more. So thank you for watching.